The North Atlantic, March 7, 1943. Kapitän-Leutnant Werner Hartmann pressed his eye against the periscope lens, watching something that violated every principle of submarine warfare he'd learned at Kiel. Convoy HX 229 stretched across the horizon, 42 merchant ships steaming eastward in formation so tight their wakes merged into parallel white roads across the grey sea. His standing orders were clear: attack at night, target the stragglers, exploit the gaps. Except there were no stragglers, there were no gaps. The convoy moved with mechanical precision that suggested something more than naval discipline. After 6 patrols and 11 confirmed kills, Werner understood merchant ship behaviour. Captains sailed at their vessels' maximum sustainable speed. Older ships fell behind. Damaged ships lost position. Convoys spread out over miles of ocean, creating hunting opportunities for patient U-boat commanders. This convoy was different. Every ship maintained exactly 8 knots. Every ship held its position within the formation. Every interval between vessels measured precisely 400 meters. Werner had been shadowing HX 229 for 18 hours, waiting for the formation to dissolve the way convoys always dissolved. Instead, it had tightened. If you're enjoying this deep dive into the story, hit the subscribe button and let us know in the comments from where in the world you are watching from today. Werner lowered the periscope and consulted his chart. HX 229 had departed New York on March 1st, 6 days ago. Standard convoy speed was 8 to 9 knots, which meant they should have covered roughly 1,200 nautical miles. He checked the dead reckoning position his navigator had calculated based on their own course tracking. The convoy was exactly where it should be, maintaining exactly the speed it had maintained since departure. No weather delays, no mechanical casualties, no ships dropping back for repairs. In Werner's experience, spanning 4 years of North Atlantic operations, this was impossible. Merchant ships were not warships. Their engines were commercial designs prioritized for fuel efficiency over reliability. Their crews were civilians, not naval personnel trained in formation keeping. Their captains were independent operators who resented naval authority and ignored sailing orders whenever convenient. Yet here was a convoy behaving like a naval task force, moving with the coordination that suggested systematic capability rather than occasional competence. Oberleutnant Klaus Richter, Werner's executive officer, approached through the narrow control room. His face carried the careful neutrality that marked all conversations in U-boat 503's confined spaces. Herr Kaleun, the convoy's anti-submarine screen has detected our position twice in the past 4 hours. Both times they forced us deep before we could establish attack position. Werner nodded, though this too troubled him. British destroyer escorts typically operated in predictable patterns. Attack one section of the convoy, the escorts respond, withdraw, and attack a different section while the escorts were out of position. Standard U-boat tactics exploited the gap between where escorts were and where they were needed. Describe their response pattern, Werner said. Klaus consulted his notes, written in the cramped shorthand that U-boat officers developed for recording observations during extended patrols. First detection occurred at 0430 hours when we attempted to move ahead of the convoy for a surface attack. Destroyer escort altered course immediately, increased speed to 28 knots, forced us to crash dive at 1,200 meters range. Second detection at 0915 hours during submerged approach from the south. Different escort vessel, same immediate response, same aggressive prosecution. Werner absorbed this information while calculating attack angles in his head. 2. Different escorts responding with identical tactics suggested coordinated doctrine rather than individual ship initiative. British anti-submarine warfare had improved dramatically since 1940, but even experienced escort commanders showed tactical variations based on ship capability and commander preference. These escorts moved as though following a checklist, predetermined responses to specific threats. What's their sensor range? Werner asked. Unknown precisely, Klaus replied, but both detections occurred beyond visual range in moderate sea states. Best estimate is they're detecting us at 1,500 to 2,000 meters, possibly using improved ASDIC equipment. Werner had read the intelligence reports about British sonar improvements. The British were refining their underwater detection gear, extending range and improving accuracy. What troubled him was the consistency. U-boat tactics relied on variability in enemy performance. Some escorts were skilled, some were not. Some had good equipment, some had old equipment. Some captains were aggressive, some were cautious. Variability created opportunities, but if every escort in every convoy performed at the level of the best escorts with the best equipment, the tactical balance shifted fundamentally. The afternoon of March 8th brought weather that should have favored submarine operations. Heavy cloud cover reduced visibility. 3-meter swells complicated surface detection. Werner brought U-boat 503 to periscope depth at 1400 hours, intending to close to attack range while the convoy struggled with deteriorating conditions. Instead, he watched through the periscope as HX 229 maintained formation with the same mechanical precision it had shown in calm seas. Every ship held its position, every interval remained consistent. The convoy moved through the heavy weather, as though connected by invisible rails. Klaus joined him at the periscope station. Herr Caléon, observe center column, third vessel from the front. Werner adjusted the magnification and focused on the indicated ship, American-built Liberty ship, approximately 7,000 gross tons, standard cargo configuration. Nothing unusual about the vessel itself, but Klaus was right to point it out. The Liberty ship was maintaining exact station despite the heavy seas, its speed and heading perfectly matched to the ships ahead and behind. Liberty ships are supposed to be unreliable, Klaus said, voicing what Werner was thinking. The Americans build them in sections, weld them together in 60 days. Intelligence reports frequent mechanical failures, cracked hulls, engine problems. That ship should be struggling in these seas. Werner watched the Liberty ship plough through a large swell, its bow rising and falling with the mechanical regularity that characterized well-maintained machinery operating within design parameters. The Americans had begun mass-producing Liberty ships in 1941, using welded construction techniques that traditional shipbuilders considered inferior to riveted hulls. Early Liberty ships had indeed suffered failures. Hulls cracked in cold water, welds failed under stress. The design had been rushed into production to replace British merchant losses, prioritizing speed of construction over engineering refinement. Yet here was a Liberty ship, probably built within the past year, operating smoothly in North Atlantic winter conditions that tested every vessel's structural integrity. "How many Liberty ships are in this convoy?" Werner asked. Klaus had been maintaining detailed intelligence notes throughout the patrol, documenting every observation about enemy capabilities and equipment. 14 confirmed Liberty ships, Klaus replied, 8 of the EC-2 cargo variant, 6 of the tanker variant. All appear to be recently constructed based on hull markings and equipment configurations, all maintaining formation without difficulty. Werner did, the arithmetic in his head. 14. Liberty ships in a 42-ship convoy meant 1/3 of the convoy consisted of vessels built using manufacturing techniques that German shipbuilding experts had dismissed as inadequate for North Atlantic service. Yet those vessels were performing as well as traditionally constructed British and Canadian merchantmen that had been designed specifically for Atlantic operations. The attack came at 2200 hours. Werner had positioned U-boat 503 ahead of the convoy's predicted track, running on the surface to maximize speed. The plan was textbook submarine tactics: wait for the convoy to approach, submerge to attack depth, fire a spread of torpedoes at the leading ships, withdraw before the escorts could respond. Werner had executed this attack profile dozens of times during previous patrols. It worked because convoys were predictable and escorts were reactive. Detect the attack, fire torpedoes, escape before the response arrived. The destroyer escort detected U-boat 503 at 21:47 hours, 13 minutes before Werner planned to submerge for the attack. Klaus's voice carried tension as he relayed the report from the radio operator. Contact bearing 095, range 2,500 meters, closing at high speed. Radar emission detected. Radar. Werner had encountered British surface search radar before, but typically only at closer ranges. 2,500 meters was well beyond the detection range of earlier British radar systems. This suggested either improved equipment or different operating procedures that prioritized early detection over precise targeting. Crash dive, Werner ordered. Take her to 80 meters. The control room erupted into controlled chaos as the crew executed emergency dive procedures. Ballast tanks flooded, the bow planes angled down. U-boat 503's hull groaned as compressed air escaped and seawater rushed in. Werner counted them in seconds, a trained habit from years of submarine operations. 30 seconds to submerge from surface running. Another 45 seconds to reach 80 meters depth. If the escort maintained its closing speed, it would pass directly overhead while U-boat 503 was still descending. The depth charges came at 21:51 hours. Werner felt them through the pressure hull before he heard them. 6 explosions in rapid succession, close enough to rattle equipment and extinguish several light bulbs, but not close enough to cause structural damage. Standard British depth charge attack pattern. 2 charges set for shallow detonation, 2 set for medium depth, 2 set for deep detonation. The pattern covered the water column, forcing the submarine to endure at least some nearby explosions regardless of its depth. Klaus studied the attack geometry, his engineering background evident in the way he analyzed the depth charge spacing and timing. Herr Kaleun, they dropped those charges within 90 seconds of detecting us. That's faster than previous encounters. Typically, we have 2 to 3 minutes from detection to attack while the escort maneuvers into position. Werner had noticed the same pattern. The escort had detected them at exceptional range, closed at maximum speed, and executed its attack with minimal delay. This suggested not just improved equipment but improved training and doctrine. British anti-submarine forces were becoming systematically more capable, reducing the margin for error that U-boat tactics required. Take us down to 120 meters, Werner ordered. Silent running. We'll let them search while the convoy passes overhead. The crew secured all non-essential equipment. The diesel engines were already shut down, the electric motors running at minimal power to maintain depth control and steering. Every man moved carefully, avoiding unnecessary noise that might be detected by British sonar. Werner had learned early in his career that patience was a submarine's best weapon. Let the enemy search. Let them waste depth charges. Wait in silence while they exhaust themselves, then surface after they've moved on and resume the hunt. Except the escort didn't leave. Werner listened through the hydrophone as the British destroyer maintained its position above U-boat 503, its propellers creating a distinct acoustic signature that marked its location with precision. Every few minutes, Werner heard the characteristic ping of active sonar, the escort searching for any sign of movement or position change. Klaus checked the chronometer. 23 minutes since the initial depth charge attack, the convoy should be moving out of range. Werner understood the implication. Standard British escort doctrine required destroyers to rejoin the convoy after prosecuting a submarine contact. The convoy's protection took priority over extended hunting of individual U-boats. Leaving the convoy unguarded while chasing a single submarine violated basic escort tactics because it exposed the merchantman to other submarines that might be operating in the area. Yet this escort remained on station, maintaining contact, preventing U-boat 503 from surfacing or maneuvering. They're willing to sacrifice convoy coverage to keep us pinned, Werner said. That suggests either they have more escorts than we estimated, or they're operating under different tactical doctrine. The answer came at 23:32 hours, when a second destroyer escort passed overhead, its propellers clearly audible through the hull. The first escort had not abandoned the convoy. It had remained in contact while a second escort took over convoy protection duties. 2 escorts where Werner had estimated 1. Multiple vessels working in coordinated roles rather than individual ships operating independently. Klaus listened to the hydrophone, tracking both sets of propellers. The second escort is maintaining position between us and the convoy. They're creating a barrier. We can't surface without being detected, can't maneuver toward the convoy without crossing their sensor range. Werner had encountered skilled British escort commanders before, but this represented systematic capability that transcended individual skill. These escorts were executing doctrine that assumed multiple vessels working together, predetermined roles and response patterns, redundant coverage that eliminated the gaps U-boat tactics exploited. If you find this story engaging, please take a moment to subscribe and enable notifications. It helps us continue producing in-depth content like this. U-boat 503 remained submerged for 4 hours and 17 minutes before the escorts finally withdrew. By then, Convoy HX-229 was 35 nautical miles ahead, moving at a speed U-boat 503 could not match while submerged. Werner surfaced at 0300 hours on March 9th, hoping to run on the surface and overtake the convoy before dawn forced him back underwater. His diesels reached maximum revolutions. The U-boat's hull cut through the North Atlantic swells at 17 knots, fast for a submarine but inadequate to close the gap against a convoy that had maintained 8 knots continuously, while Werner had been pinned at depth. Klaus performed the calculations, his pencil moving across the navigation chart with the precision of someone who understood that mathematics governed submarine warfare more completely than courage or skill. If the convoy maintains its current speed and course, we'll need 11 hours to regain attack position. Dawn is in 3 hours. We'll have to submerge again, which reduces our speed to 7 knots. The convoy will continue to pull ahead. Werner stared at the empty horizon where HX-229 had disappeared into the darkness. In 4 years of North Atlantic operations, he had never lost a convoy this completely. Individual ships escaped. Convoys scattered under attack. But properly executed Wolfpack tactics always maintained contact, always created opportunities for follow-up attacks. The tactical manual written by Admiral Dönitz himself emphasized persistence. Shadow the convoy, wait for gaps, attack from multiple angles. Eventually the escorts made mistakes, the convoy fragmented, and U-boats found their opportunities. Except HX-229 had not fragmented. The escorts had not made mistakes. The convoy had maintained its formation with mechanical consistency, while the escorts had executed their anti-submarine doctrine with equal consistency. Werner had done everything correctly according to established U-boat tactics, and it had not been enough. Herr Kaleun, Klaus said carefully, I recommend we break contact and search for a different convoy. We've expended significant battery capacity and have only 3 days of provisions remaining before we must return to base. The suggestion was tactically sound. Werner had standing orders to prioritize crew safety and boat preservation. No convoy was worth losing a U-boat and its experienced crew. Yet breaking contact felt like admission of something Werner was not ready to acknowledge. That British convoy defense had evolved beyond German submarine tactics, that the tactical balance in the North Atlantic was shifting against U-boats in ways that individual skill and courage could not overcome. Set course for grid square B-15. Werner ordered. Intelligence reports indicate convoy on 166 should be in that area. We'll make 1 more patrol sweep before returning to base. The radio message reached U-boat 503 on March 10th at 1400 hours. BDU, Befehlshaber der U-boot, U-boat Command Headquarters, transmitted operational intelligence updates twice daily to boats operating in the North Atlantic. Werner took the decoded message from the radio operator and read it in the cramped privacy of his commander's compartment. U-boat 407 reported sinking. 2 ships from convoy HX-229 on March 9th. U-boat 384 sank 3 ships from same convoy. U-boat 615 damaged 1 additional vessel. Total confirmed tonnage, approximately 35,000 gross tons. Werner read the message twice, calculating the mathematics that governed submarine warfare. HX-229 had consisted of 42 ships representing perhaps 300,000 gross tons of shipping. 5 ships sunk or damaged meant roughly 12% of the convoy destroyed. In 1941, those numbers would have been considered a marginal success. In 1942, barely adequate. In March of 1943, WWII was describing it as a significant achievement. The trend was unmistakable. U-boats were sinking fewer ships per convoy attacked. British defences were improving faster than German tactics could adapt. Werner had watched this evolution throughout his 4 years of North Atlantic service. Early patrols had been almost leisurely affairs. British convoys sailed with minimal escort, often just 2 or 3 destroyers for 40 ships. Merchant vessels scattered under attack, creating individual targets that submarines could hunt methodically. A single U-boat could sink 4 or 5 ships in one night's work. By 1942, the calculus had changed. More escorts, better coordination, improved detection equipment. Werner's confirmed kills per patrol had decreased from an average of 4 ships in 1941 to 2 ships in 1942. His most recent patrol before this one had yielded a single confirmed sinking, a straggler separated from its convoy by mechanical failure. Now he was watching a convoy maintain formation under attack by multiple U-boats, losing only 12% of its vessels while crossing one of the most dangerous sections of the North Atlantic. The mathematics suggested something Werner found difficult to accept. The British were winning the convoy battle not through superior tactics or technological breakthrough, but through systematic improvement in every aspect of convoy defense. Better training, better equipment, better doctrine, better coordination, individual improvements that combined into cumulative advantage that was shifting the tactical balance away from submarines towards surface escorts. Klaus appeared at the compartment entrance, his expression carrying news Werner suspected he would not want to hear. Herr Kalliun, we've received another transmission from WWII. U-boat 407 reports being attacked by aircraft while surfacing to charge batteries. Forced to remain submerged, battery critically low. U-boat 384 reports similar encounter. WWII estimates 3 long-range patrol aircraft are operating in the area where HX-229 was attacked. Werner understood the implications immediately. British long-range aircraft had been a growing threat throughout 1942, but their range had been limited. U-boats could attack convoys in the mid-Atlantic Gap, the area beyond effective air cover from either Britain or North America. That gap had been shrinking as British aircraft range improved, but it still represented several hundred miles of ocean where U-boats could operate on the surface without fear of air attack. If British aircraft were now patrolling areas where HX-229 had been attacked, the mid-Atlantic Gap was closing. Soon there would be no area of the North Atlantic where U-boats could safely surface to charge batteries and maintain pursuit speed. What aircraft type? Werner asked. WWII believes they are American B-24 Liberators, modified for maritime patrol. Range approximately 3,000 miles, endurance 14 hours, armed with depth charges and machine guns. Werner had seen intelligence reports about American B-24 seconds being transferred to British Coastal Command for anti-submarine operations. The B-24 was a long-range heavy bomber designed for strategic bombing missions over Germany. Adapting it for maritime patrol required removing bomb bay armor and installing additional fuel tanks, but the resulting aircraft had range that exceeded any previous patrol plane. 3,000-mile range meant these aircraft could cover the entire North Atlantic convoy routes. 14-hour endurance meant they could maintain patrol stations for extended periods, providing continuous air cover that made U-boat surface operations impossible. The tactical situation is deteriorating, Klaus said, stating what both men were thinking but neither wanted to acknowledge officially. Convoys are maintaining tighter formations. Escorts are more numerous and better coordinated. Aircraft coverage is extending into areas where we previously operated freely. Our attack opportunities are decreasing while the risks are increasing. Werner folded the message and tucked it into his logbook, documentation that would be reviewed by WWII staff when U-boat 503 returned to base. Admiral Dönitz has been requesting updated tactical guidance for months. Perhaps these reports will convince WWII that the situation requires more than minor adjustments to existing doctrine. The days that followed provided Werner with ample time to contemplate the shifting tactical balance. U-boat 503 searched grid square BE-15 without locating convoy on 166. They expanded their search pattern, covering adjacent grid squares while consuming fuel and provisions that drew them steadily closer to the point where they would have to abort the patrol and return to base. On March 14th, they encountered a lone merchantman, a British freighter of perhaps 4,000 tons sailing independently rather than in convoy. Single ships were rare by 1943. Most merchant captains understood that sailing without escort was suicide. This vessel was either extremely brave or extremely foolish, probably a fast ship whose captain believed speed provided better protection than convoy, escort. Werner attacked from periscope depth at 1700 hours, firing a single torpedo from 1,200 meters range. The torpedo ran true, striking the freighter amidships. Werner watched through the periscope as the ship settled rapidly, its crew abandoning in lifeboats with the practiced efficiency of men who had trained for this moment. The entire action took 11 minutes from torpedo launch to the freighter disappearing beneath the surface. One torpedo, one ship, 4,000 tons added to Werner's patrol total. In 1941, this would have been considered a minor success, barely worth reporting. In March of 1943, it represented the only confirmed kill of U-boat 503's entire patrol. Klaus recorded the sinking in the patrol log, noting the position, time, estimated tonnage, and weather conditions. Standard documentation that WWII required for every attack, successful or failed. After completing the entry, he looked at Werner with the directness that 4 years of shared service had earned. Herr Kalliun, if I may speak frankly, this patrol has been unlike any previous operation. We located a convoy, shadowed it for 24 hours, attempted multiple attacks, and achieved no results. Then we sank one independent ship that was sailing without escort. The tactical balance has shifted in ways our training did not prepare us for. Werner could not disagree. His training at U-boat school in Kiel had emphasized aggression, persistence, and tactical flexibility. Attack convoys from multiple angles, exploit weak points in escort coverage, use surface speed at night to regain position after being forced deep. The fundamental doctrine assumed that submarines possessed inherent advantages in concealment and maneuverability that escorts could not overcome systematically. That assumption was no longer valid. British escorts were detecting U-boats at ranges that negated concealment advantage. Coordinated escort tactics were eliminating the gaps that U-boats had exploited for maneuvering into attack positions. Long-range aircraft were forcing submarines to remain submerged during daylight hours, eliminating the speed advantage that surface running provided. The cumulative effect was transforming the North Atlantic from a hunting ground where skilled U-boat commanders could reliably sink merchant shipping into a contested space, where submarines faced systematic opposition that reduced their effectiveness regardless of individual crew skill or commander experience. U-boat 503 returned to Saint-Nazaire on March 19, 1943. Werner submitted his patrol report the following morning, documenting the encounter with convoy HX-229, the inability to achieve attack position despite multiple attempts, the systematic effectiveness of British escort tactics, and the growing threat from long-range patrol aircraft. The report concluded with a recommendation that WWII revise tactical doctrine to address the changing operational environment in the North Atlantic. Werner received a summons to WWII headquarters in Paris 3 days later. The message specified that his presence was required for operational debriefing and tactical assessment, standard procedure after patrols that encountered unusual conditions or achieved noteworthy results. Werner suspected his patrol had qualified as unusual, though not in ways that would generate commendations. The WWII headquarters occupied a requisitioned hotel in the 16th arrondissement, its Art Deco facade incongruous against the military staff cars parked along the Boulevard Suchet. Werner arrived on March 23, wearing his dress uniform with the Knight's Cross at his throat, earned after his 8th confirmed kill in October of 1941. The medal felt heavier now than it had when Admiral Dönitz had personally awarded it, as though the weight of unsuccessful patrols accumulated around his neck like ballast. Korvettenkapitän Ernst Fischer met Werner in the building's marble lobby. Fischer was a staff officer, one of dozens who processed patrol reports and compiled operational statistics for Admiral Dönitz's daily briefings. He had never commanded a U-boat in combat, but his engineering background made him valuable for technical assessment of enemy capabilities and equipment. Fisher's handshake was firm, professional, carrying none of the camaraderie that submarine commanders shared with operational colleagues. Captain Lieutenant Hartmann, thank you for coming. Your patrol report raised several questions that Admiral Dönitz once addressed before finalizing our tactical assessment. They rode the elevator to the 4th floor in silence. Werner watched the brass needle track their ascent, remembering similar elevators in Hamburg before the war, mechanical precision that seemed to belong to a different era when Germany's future had appeared limitless. Fisher led Werner to a conference room overlooking the boulevard. Maps covered every wall surface, showing the North Atlantic divided into grid squares, each marked with symbols indicating convoy routes, U-boat positions, and confirmed sinkings. Werner recognized the cartographic language immediately. This was how WWII fought the war, tracking hundreds of individual engagements across thousands of square miles, looking for patterns that might reveal tactical advantages or enemy weaknesses. A large table dominated the room's center, covered with documents, photographs, and what appeared to be technical manuals. Fisher gestured toward a chair positioned to face the maps. Please, sit. Would you like coffee? It's real coffee, not the ersatz we're issuing to the boats. Werner accepted the coffee, grateful for its bitter warmth. He had not slept well since returning to port, his nights filled with images of Convoy HX-229 maintaining its impossible formation while his torpedoes remained unfired. Fisher settled into a chair across the table and opened a folder containing Werner's patrol report. Your encounter with Convoy HX-229 was unusual for several reasons. First, you shadowed the convoy for 24 hours without achieving attack position. Second, you reported that the convoy maintained formation despite heavy weather. Third, you noted that escort vessels detected your boat at ranges exceeding our previous estimates of British sonar capability. I need to understand whether these observations represent isolated incidents or patterns we should incorporate into our tactical doctrine. Werner chose his words carefully, aware that staff officers valued precision over dramatic interpretation. The convoy's formation discipline was beyond anything I've encountered in 4 years of North Atlantic operations. Every ship maintained exact speed and position. There were no stragglers, no gaps, no vessels falling back for mechanical repairs. The formation moved as though the merchant captains were following predetermined navigation coordinates rather than visual station keeping. Fisher made notes in precise handwriting. How many ships were in the convoy? 42 confirmed, Werner replied. 14 were American Liberty ships, which intelligence reports have described as mechanically unreliable due to welded construction and rapid production methods. Yet these Liberty ships maintained formation as effectively as traditionally built British merchantmen. Fisher looked up from his notes, his expression carrying the calculated skepticism of someone trained to question observations that contradicted established assessments. Are you certain about the Liberty ship count? 14 vessels of that type in a single convoy would represent significant American production capacity. Werner had anticipated this question. I had Oberleutnant Richter maintain detailed observation logs throughout our contact with the convoy. We documented hull markings, cargo configurations, and construction characteristics. 14 Liberty ships is a conservative estimate. There may have been more that we could not positively identify due to observation angles and lighting conditions. Fisher consulted another document from his folder, this one marked with stamps indicating it originated from Kriegsmarine Intelligence Headquarters. We've been receiving reports about American ship production since late 1942. The numbers initially seemed implausible, but multiple sources have confirmed their general accuracy. The Americans are currently building Liberty ships at a rate of approximately 3 per day across 18 shipyards. Werner did the arithmetic automatically, a skill every U-boat commander developed for calculating tonnage and attack geometries. 3 ships per day meant 90 ships per month, over 1,000 ships per year. The entire British merchant fleet at the start of the war had been approximately 3,000 ships. The Americans were replacing 1/3 of Britain's pre-war merchant capacity every year through a single ship design manufactured in barely 2 years. 3 ships per day, Werner repeated, hearing the impossibility in his own voice. That would mean the Americans are launching new vessels faster than we can sink them. Fisher's expression remained carefully neutral, but Werner saw acknowledgement in his eyes. Our current sinking rate across all U-boats operating in the Atlantic averages approximately 50 merchant ships per month. American production alone exceeds 90 ships per month, not counting British and Canadian construction. The mathematics are unfavorable. Unfavorable was a considerable understatement. Werner had spent 4 years sinking merchant ships on the assumption that each vessel destroyed represented irreplaceable tonnage subtracted from Britain's ability to sustain its war effort. If the Americans were building ships faster than Germany could sink them, then every U-boat patrol, every torpedo fired, every risk taken, achieved nothing beyond temporary disruption of a logistics system that repaired itself faster than German submarines could damage it. Fisher continued, his voice carrying the flat precision of someone delivering medical diagnosis rather than strategic assessment. The Liberty ship program began in 1941. Initial production was slow due to construction difficulties and design refinements. By mid-1942, American shipyards had resolved most technical problems and achieved consistent output. Current estimates suggest the Americans will complete approximately 1,800 Liberty ships by the end of 1943. 1,800 ships. Werner thought about Convoy HX 229's 14 Liberty ships, each carrying perhaps 7,000 tons of cargo. Multiply that by 1,800 vessels, and the numbers became difficult to comprehend. 12 million tons of shipping capacity created in 2 years by a single nation using a single ship design. Germany's entire pre-war merchant fleet had totaled roughly 4 million tons. The Liberty ships are only part of American production, Fisher said, pulling another document from his folder. They're also building Victory ships, tankers, and specialized cargo vessels. Total American merchant ship construction for 1943 is estimated at 2,500 vessels, representing approximately 18 million gross tons. Werner set down his coffee cup with hands that had begun to tremble slightly. 18 million tons in a single year. Germany's U-boat force had sunk approximately 6 million tons of Allied shipping during the entire war so far. The Americans were building 3 times what Germany had destroyed, and they had only been fully mobilized for industrial production since mid-1942. We cannot win a tonnage war against American production capacity, Werner said quietly. Fisher's response carried no judgment, only acknowledgement of mathematical reality. No, we cannot. Admiral Dönitz has been reviewing production figures for several months. The conclusion is that our strategic objective must shift from destroying merchant shipping to disrupting convoy schedules and forcing the Allies to divert resources to anti-submarine warfare. We cannot sink enough ships to prevent material from reaching Britain, but we might delay deliveries long enough to impact their operational planning. Werner understood the implication. Germany was abandoning the goal of strangling Britain through submarine blockade. The strategy that had almost succeeded in 1917, that Admiral Dönitz had rebuilt during the 1930s, that had guided German naval doctrine since the war's beginning, was being quietly discarded because American industrial capacity had made it mathematically impossible. You mentioned escort detection ranges, Fisher continued, moving to the next item in his systematic review of Werner's patrol report. You reported being detected at approximately 2,500 meters, well beyond our previous estimates of British sonar capability. Did you observe any characteristics that might explain this improved performance? Werner recalled the encounter with precise clarity, the kind of detail that submarine commanders learned to preserve because their survival often depended on pattern recognition. 2 aspects were unusual. First, the escort detected us while we were running on the surface at night, which suggests radar rather than sonar. Second, when they forced us deep, they maintained contact for over 4 hours using active sonar that appeared more powerful than previous British equipment. Fisher made additional notes. We've received similar reports from other boats. British escorts are using centimetric radar that provides detection ranges exceeding our previous estimates. They're also using improved sonar systems, possibly American-manufactured equipment transferred under Lend-Lease agreements. The combination gives them detection capabilities that make surface attack approaches extremely difficult. Werner thought about his failed attempts to achieve attack position against Convoy HX-229. Every approach had been detected before he could close to effective torpedo range. The escorts had responded immediately with aggressive prosecution that forced U-boat 503 deep and eliminated any possibility of maneuvering into position. The tactical advantage that submarines had enjoyed through most of the war, the ability to approach unseen and attack without warning, it was being systematically eroded by British detection equipment that made concealment nearly impossible. The escorts are also operating under different tactical doctrine, Werner said. Previously, escorts would prosecute a submarine contact for 15 to 20 minutes, then return to convoy protection duties. During my encounter with HX-229, one escort maintained contact for over 4 hours, while a second escort provided convoy coverage. They're coordinating multiple vessels to eliminate the gaps in their defensive screen. Fisher consulted his notes. How many escorts were with Convoy HX-229? Minimum of 6 confirmed through hydrophone tracking and periscope observation, Werner replied. Possibly 8 or more that we didn't detect during our limited contact. Fisher's pencil moved across his notepad with increased urgency. 6 to 8 escorts for a 42-ship convoy represents approximately 1 escort for every 5 to 7 merchant vessels. That's double the escort ratio we observed in 1941. The British are allocating significantly more defensive resources to convoy protection. Werner had not calculated the escort-to-merchant ratio during his patrol, but Fisher's observation revealed another dimension of the changing tactical balance. More escorts meant better coverage, more redundancy, fewer gaps for U-boats to exploit. Combined with improved detection equipment and longer aircraft range, the cumulative effect was transforming convoy defense from reactive protection to proactive denial of submarine operating areas. There's one additional observation, Werner said. The escorts were operating with aircraft support even in the mid-Atlantic gap. We detected long-range patrol aircraft on 2 occasions, forcing us to remain submerged during daylight hours. This eliminated our ability to use surface speed for repositioning ahead of the convoy. Fisher pulled out another map, this one showing the North Atlantic with coloured zones indicating aircraft coverage ranges. Werner saw that the zones had expanded significantly since the last time he had reviewed similar maps during his previous patrol briefing. American B-24 Liberators modified for maritime patrol, Fisher explained, pointing to the expanded coverage areas. Range approximately 3,000 miles, which allows them to cover most of the North Atlantic convoy routes. The British are also using Canadian-based aircraft to provide coverage from the west, while Iceland-based aircraft cover the northern routes. The mid-Atlantic gap is closing. Within 6 months, we estimate there will be no area of the North Atlantic where U-boats can safely operate on the surface during daylight hours. Werner stared at the map, watching his tactical world shrink into zones of impossible operations. U-boats required surface running to maintain speed, charge batteries, and position ahead of convoys for submerged attacks, force them to remain underwater continuously, and they became slow, nearly blind, limited to chance encounters rather than coordinated pack tactics. Remove the mid-Atlantic gap, and submarines would have nowhere to operate without constant threat of air attack. We're losing the North Atlantic, Werner said, the words emerging before he could consider whether such assessment was appropriate for a subordinate officer addressing King Headquarters staff. Fisher's expression remained neutral, but he did not contradict Werner's conclusion. Admiral Dönitz is aware of the deteriorating tactical situation. He's requesting additional U-boats, improved torpedoes, and better detection equipment. But the fundamental problem is industrial capacity. The British and Americans are building escorts, aircraft, and merchant ships faster than we can build submarines and train crews to operate them. Fisher pulled out a final document, this one containing columns of numbers that Werner recognized as production statistics. Current U-boat strength is approximately 400 boats, with approximately 200 operational at any time. We're commissioning approximately 15 new boats per month. Losses are averaging 12 boats per month, which provides a net gain of 3 boats monthly. At this rate, we'll achieve peak operational strength of approximately 220 to 230 boats by late 1943 or early 1944. Werner studied the numbers, applying the same analytical approach he used for calculating torpedo angles and attack geometries. 230 operational U-boats represented Germany's maximum submarine force, assuming production continued at current rates and losses did not increase. That force would be operating against convoy defenses that were improving monthly, merchant production that exceeded German sinking capacity by 5-to-1 ratios, and aircraft coverage that eliminated safe operating areas. 230 boats cannot control the North Atlantic against the forces opposing us, Werner said. Fischer's silence confirmed what both men understood but could not officially acknowledge. Germany had lost the Battle of the Atlantic, not through any single defeat or tactical failure, but through accumulated small defeats and systematic improvements in enemy capability that had shifted the strategic balance beyond recovery. U-boats could still sink ships. Individual commanders could still achieve successful patrols, but the cumulative effect across all operations was trending steadily toward Allied dominance that German industrial capacity could not overcome. Admiral Dönitz will want to speak with you personally, Fischer said, standing to indicate the preliminary debriefing was complete. He reviews all patrol reports from experienced commanders, but your encounter with Convoy HX 229 raises questions about our tactical doctrine that he wants to address directly. Werner followed Fischer through headquarters corridors, decorated with maps and operational charts. Staff officers moved with purposeful efficiency, processing the constant flow of radio messages, patrol reports, and intelligence updates that fed BWII's operational planning. Werner recognized the atmosphere from his time as a junior officer before the war, when naval headquarters had been focused on fleet exercises and theoretical planning. Now the same systems were processing the mathematics of a losing campaign, tracking sinking rates that could not match construction rates, calculating loss ratios that steadily favored the enemy. Admiral Karl Dönitz stood beside a large plotting table when Werner entered his office, studying a map marked with red pins indicating U-boat positions across the Atlantic. The admiral was 51 years old, lean and intense, with the focused energy of someone who had spent his entire career preparing for submarine warfare. He had commanded U-boats during the Great War, survived British captivity, and dedicated the interwar years to rebuilding Germany's submarine force. Everything about his career had been preparation for this moment, for commanding a fleet that would strangle Britain's maritime lifelines and force a negotiated peace. Except the moment had passed, Werner could see it in the way Dönitz studied the plotting table, his eyes tracking the pins that represented U-boats attempting to intercept convoys across thousands of miles of ocean. There were too few pins relative to the vast spaces they needed to control. Too many merchant ships reached Britain despite U-boat patrols. Too many Allied escorts and aircraft transformed the Atlantic from German hunting ground to contested space, where submarines operated at increasing disadvantage. Kapitän-Leutnant Hartmann, Dönitz said without a preliminary greeting, your patrol report makes interesting reading. You shadowed a convoy for 24 hours without achieving an attack position. In 4 years of war, I've never received a report like that from an experienced commander. Werner stood at attention, uncertain whether the admiral's observation carried criticism or genuine curiosity. The tactical situation has changed, Herr Admiral. The convoy maintained formation with precision that prevented any approach opportunities. The escorts detected us at ranges that exceeded our previous estimates. Aircraft forced us to remain submerged during daylight. We could not execute standard attack procedures because the enemy has eliminated the vulnerabilities those procedures were designed to exploit. Dönitz gestured toward a chair. Sit. Tell me everything you observed about this convoy. Not just the tactical details in your report, but your assessment of what has changed in the North Atlantic. Werner spent the next 40 minutes describing Convoy HX 229 inches methodical detail. The Liberty ships maintain formation in heavy weather. The escorts coordinate multiple vessels to maintain continuous contact. The long-range aircraft extended coverage into areas that had been safe for surface operations. The systematic effectiveness that suggested not individual competence, but institutional capability, applied consistently across all elements of convoy defense. Dönitz listened without interruption, occasionally making notes on a pad positioned beside the plotting table. When Werner finished, the Admiral walked to the window overlooking the Boulevard Suchet. Outside, Paris continued its occupied existence. French civilians navigating around German military vehicles, pretending normalcy, while foreign armies used their city as administrative headquarters. "I've been receiving reports like yours for 6 months, Dönitz said, his voice carrying fatigue that Werner had not heard before. Every patrol describes the same pattern: tighter convoy formations, more escorts, better detection equipment, longer aircraft range. Our sinking rates are declining while our losses are increasing. Mathematics are becoming unfavorable." Werner waited, understanding that the Admiral was processing thoughts he could not share with most officers. Dönitz had built his reputation on aggressive submarine warfare, on the theory that enough U-boats attacking enough convoys would sink enough ships to force Britain to negotiate. That theory had been based on assumptions about British defensive capacity and American industrial production that were proving incorrect. "The Americans are building 3 merchant ships every day," Dönitz continued. "The British have over 400 escort vessels operational, with more entering service monthly. They have long-range aircraft covering convoy routes from Canada to Iceland to Britain. They have radar, sonar, direction-finding equipment that makes submarine operations increasingly difficult. And we have 400 U-boats, of which perhaps 200 are operational at any time, attempting to control an ocean that spans 3,000 miles. The Admiral turned from the window to face Werner directly. "Tell me honestly, Captain Lieutenant, based on your experience, based on what you've observed, can we win the Battle of the Atlantic?" The question hung in the air between them, carrying weight that transcended military protocol. Werner understood he was being asked not just for tactical assessment, but for truth that might contradict official optimism. An experienced commander's judgment about whether continued operations justified the cost in men and boats. "No, Herr Admiral," Werner said quietly, "not against the forces currently opposing us. The Americans are building ships faster than we can sink them. The British are improving convoy defense faster than we can adapt our tactics. Our U-boats are excellent weapons operated by skilled crews, but individual excellence cannot overcome systematic disadvantage in numbers, technology, and industrial capacity." Dönitz returned to the plotting table, his fingers tracing convoy routes across the Atlantic map. "I reached the same conclusion 3 months ago. I've been trying to convince Gross Admiral Raeder and the Führer that we need to redirect naval construction toward defensive operations, building escort vessels and coastal defense forces rather than additional U-boats. They won't listen. They want more submarines, more aggressive operations, more sinking reports that can be announced in radio broadcasts." Werner heard the frustration in the Admiral's voice, the recognition that strategic understanding meant nothing when political leadership demanded continued offensive operations, regardless of tactical impossibility. Dönitz had become an expert in submarine warfare, only to watch that expertise become irrelevant against enemy capabilities that submarines could not overcome. "I'm sending you back to operations," Dönitz said. "Not because I believe you can achieve different results, but because we have no alternative. Germany needs every experienced commander in the North Atlantic, even if the mathematics favor the enemy. You will continue patrol operations, continue engaging convoys when opportunities exist, and continue submitting detailed reports about enemy capabilities. Those reports are valuable even if they document our declining effectiveness." Werner understood the assignment's implications. He was being ordered to continue operations that both he and the Admiral recognized as increasingly futile, to take U-boat 503 back into the North Atlantic, where British escorts and American aircraft were systematically eliminating German submarine effectiveness. The mission was no longer sinking merchant ships. The mission was gathering intelligence about enemy capabilities while surviving long enough to return with that intelligence. "One final question," Dönitz said as Werner prepared to leave. "The Liberty ships you observed in Convoy HX 229, you reported they maintained formation in heavy weather despite intelligence assessments, suggesting they were mechanically unreliable. Do you believe those intelligence assessments were incorrect, or have the Americans resolved their initial construction problems?" Werner considered the question carefully, remembering the Liberty ships he had watched through his periscope. "I believe the intelligence reports about early Liberty ship failures were accurate, but the Americans have implemented systematic improvements. They're using welded construction that German shipbuilding tradition considers inferior, but they've refined their techniques to produce reliable vessels. More importantly, they're building so many ships that even a high failure rate still results in more operational vessels than we can sink." Dönitz nodded slowly, absorbing another confirmation that American industrial methods were succeeding where traditional approaches would have failed. Mass production of adequate equipment was defeating limited production of superior equipment. Simple designs, manufactured at enormous scale, were overwhelmingly sophisticated designs produced in modest quantities. The Germans had built better submarines, better tactics, better crews. The Americans had built more ships, more escorts, more aircraft, and more was winning. Werner left WWII headquarters in late afternoon, Paris traffic flowing around him as he walked toward the metro station. He passed cafes where German officers drank coffee and discussed strategy, bakeries where French civilians queued for rationed bread, bookstores displaying approved literature that pretended Paris remained a center of European culture rather than an occupied capital. The normal surface of city life concealed the grinding reality of industrial warfare, where production capacity mattered more than tactical skill or individual courage. U-boat 503 departed Saint-Nazaire on April 8, 1943, beginning Werner's 6th war patrol. The crew was experienced, the boat was mechanically sound, the torpedoes were properly maintained. Everything that could be controlled was controlled. Everything that mattered, convoy sizes, escort numbers, aircraft coverage, merchant ship production rates, existed beyond German capacity to influence through U-boat operations. Klaus stood beside Werner on the bridge as U-boat 503 cleared the harbour entrance and turned northwest toward the convoy routes. The Atlantic stretched grey and empty toward a horizon that promised no victories, only the chance to survive another patrol while documenting Germany's declining effectiveness in the one domain where she had briefly held advantage. "Herr Kalliun," Klaus said carefully, "the crew knows the tactical situation is difficult. They understand we're operating against improving enemy defences. But they trust your leadership. Whatever happens during this patrol, they'll follow your orders." Werner appreciated the gesture, though he recognized it as Klaus's way of acknowledging what both men understood. U-boat operations were transitioning from aggressive hunting to careful survival. The mission was no longer sinking merchant ships, but gathering intelligence while avoiding the systematic anti-submarine forces that British and American navies had deployed across the North Atlantic. Every patrol going forward would be measured not by tonnage sunk, but by whether the crew returned alive with information that might help other U-boats survive their own patrols. The patrol lasted 43 days. U-boat 503 located 2 convoys, attempted 4 separate attacks, and achieved no confirmed sinkings. British escorts detected every approach attempt, forcing Werner deep before he could maneuver into firing position. Long-range aircraft prevented surface operations during daylight hours, reducing U-boat 503 to submerged crawling that consumed battery capacity without providing tactical advantage. On May 14th, while attempting to attack convoy ON 184, U-boat 503 was depth-charged by 3 escort vessels operating in coordinated pattern that suggested they had precise knowledge of submarine location rather than estimated position. Werner took his boat to 180 meters, well beyond safe operating depth, hearing the pressure hull groan under compression that threatened to crush them like a beer can in a closing fist. They survived because the escorts eventually withdrew to rejoin their convoy, not because Werner's evasion tactics were successful. They surfaced after dark to find the convoy had pulled so far ahead that pursuit was impossible. Werner recorded the engagement in his patrol log with clinical precision that masked the terror of hearing depth charges explode close enough to extinguish lights and crack pressure gauges. Klaus made no comment about the near miss, but Werner saw recognition in his eyes. They had come within meters of joining the growing list of U-boats that simply disappeared, lost with all hands to enemy action that left no survivors and no witnesses. U-boat 503 returned to Saint-Nazaire on May 20th with empty torpedo tubes and a crew that had spent 43 days achieving nothing beyond survival. Werner submitted his patrol report, knowing it would add to the accumulating evidence of German submarine ineffectiveness. No ships sunk, multiple failed attack attempts, continuous enemy pressure that prevented successful prosecution of tactical opportunities. The patrol was not unusual. Across the North Atlantic, other U-boats were experiencing similar frustrations, encountering convoys they could not attack, facing escorts they could not evade, operating in an environment that had shifted decisively against submarine warfare. The medal ceremony occurred on June 3rd. Admiral Dönitz personally awarded Werner the German Cross in Gold for his cumulative service achievements. 11 confirmed merchant ships sunk, 4 years of combat operations, or multiple successful patrols during the crucial early years of the Atlantic campaign. Werner stood at attention while the Admiral pinned the medal to his uniform, hearing formal words about courage, dedication, and service to the Reich. The ceremony was necessary because medals maintained morale and recognized achievement. But Werner understood the underlying message. He was being decorated for past success because future success was increasingly unlikely. The awards ceremony was an acknowledgement that submarine warfare's golden period had ended, that experienced commanders were being honored for what they had achieved before Allied defenses became insurmountable. After the ceremony, Fischer approached Werner with another folder of documents. BDO wants you to review these production figures. We need experienced commanders to assess whether our intelligence estimates are plausible or whether we're receiving disinformation. Werner accepted the folder, opening it to reveal detailed breakdowns of American ship construction. The numbers had grown since his April briefing. Liberty ship production for 1943 was now estimated at 2,000 vessels. Total American merchant construction exceeded 20 million gross tons. Britain and Canada were adding another 6 million tons of new construction. Combined Allied merchant production for a single year totaled 26 million gross tons, more than 4 times what Germany had sunk during the entire war. Are these numbers accurate? Werner asked. Fischer's expression confirmed they were. Multiple independent sources, aerial reconnaissance of American shipyards, captured documents, interrogations of merchant sailors. Everything confirms the Americans have achieved industrial production capacity that exceeds our previous estimates by significant margins. They're building merchant ships the way they build automobiles, standardized designs manufactured on assembly lines using interchangeable components and unskilled labor. Quality is adequate rather than excellent, but quantity more than compensates. Werner remembered Convoy HX 229's Liberty ships maintaining formation through heavy weather. Adequate quality manufactured at impossible scale. The American approach to warfare reduced complex technical challenges to industrial problems that could be solved through systematic application of resources. They were not building the best merchant ships or the best escorts or the best aircraft. They were building sufficient equipment in overwhelming quantities that made German qualitative advantages irrelevant. What does BDO estimate for U-boat effectiveness going forward? Werner asked. Fischer's pause carried more information than his eventual response. Declining. We're currently sinking approximately 50 merchant ships per month, while the Allies are building approximately 220 ships per month. Even if we triple our sinking rate, we cannot match their construction capacity. The strategic situation is mathematically unsolvable. Werner closed the folder and returned it to Fischer. The numbers required no further analysis. Germany had lost the Battle of the Atlantic not through any dramatic engagement or tactical failure, but through accumulated incremental defeats and systematic improvements in enemy capability that submarines could not overcome. U-boats would continue operations because Germany had no alternative strategy for disrupting Allied logistics. Crews would continue sailing, torpedoes would continue firing, patrol reports would continue documenting declining effectiveness, but the outcome was determined by industrial capacity rather than tactical excellence, and that capacity favored the Allies by ratios that no amount of courage or skill could overcome. Thank you for reading. For more detailed historical breakdowns, check out the other videos on your screen now, and don't forget to subscribe.